Voters and the politicians have to decide what we're going to what they want. Do they want to keep debt spending, or do they want to climb out of this hole? And what is government responsible for? So it's going to take a little pain to get out of it, and ultimately the voters are going to have to decide what they want.
And I'm, of course, of the libertarian cloth, so I'm a guy that believes that really government isn't responsible for a whole lot and shouldn't be involved in a whole lot.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm sure that you're pretty close to that level.
Yeah, no, I'm unapologetically conservative, but I have a lot of libertarian leanings myself. But I also believe in the idea of representative government, and that's been kind of the hardest thing for me. Is I've taken votes that I don't personally agree with because I believe in that representative government. I mean, people sent me there to do a good job and represent them, and my district is very diverse. I mean, we go from the Moline, Rock Island, the inner city, all the way out to Whiteside County, where it's very rural and agricultural. So it's a balancing act, and you try to do the right thing. And
that's really refreshing, though. I mean, because you hear a lot of politicians just kind of, even though as in this constitutional republic, they are supposed to be exercising the will of the people, but oftentimes they kind of go with party lines or with their inside kind of crew or whatever you want to call it saying. So that's very refreshing to hear.
Seldom with their constituents.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's cool that, like you said, even though you may not necessarily agree, you were sent there to represent the people. So that's really cool, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now, obviously, you are a firefighter. So I'm assuming over in the state of Illinois or the city of Moline has the firefighter paramedic union.
Correct.
So,
local.
So that's something that, you don't often hear of a Republican supporting. But the way I look at things is, look, if people voted for it, if the union or if the firefighters as a whole vote for it, I'm a guy who supports the people that want to be in it, and I'm also a person who supports the people that don't want to pay into it and don't want to be represented by it, and let the cards fall where they may. So I've always kind of been that way. And look, no matter which way you have to go on it as a state senator and the way your heart feels, but you being a firefighter, that's a very dangerous job. We just had one gentleman killed and one gentleman still fighting for his life up in Clinton. And so it's a very, very dangerous job, just as law enforcement is. So that's a tough one for me to say those people don't deserve a pension, because they do. Obviously, they go through a lot of mental, physical, spiritual anguish, the stuff that they have to see. You of course, as a firefighter and paramedic, has seen some horrible stuff. But I think I posed this question to you before when we were golfing for a fundraiser. And what I had asked was, would it make sense? Is it a possible solve for the state of Illinois and for municipalities that are having a lot of trouble keeping up with those pensions to say in the future, just figure out a way and let the unions obviously negotiate higher salaries for everybody, and then teach those people how to invest their money because they are getting paid a lot more up front, and that way that the pensions and everything on the backside aren't bankrupting a state or a municipality.
Yeah. The problem with pensions as a whole is, well, number one, if it was easy to solve, it'd be solved already, right? But there has been that idea thrown around quite a lot, as what you're talking about is either more pay or not more pay, but just switching over to like a 401k style. The problem with that is pensions work a lot like Social Security. So I'm working now, my pension dues are paying for somebody that's retired.
Right.
And so it goes on and on. So if we do want to switch
it's
over...
It's an amazing Ponzi scheme, by the
way. So if we do want to switch over to a 401k style for new hires, new employees, that's fine, but we're going to have to find this huge sum of money to fill that gap. And looking at the pension liability, you see kind of how big that ball of cash has to be. So
right.
Is the pension system unsustainable? I don't think so. I think if we make some tweaks here and there, we can get it back on the right path, much like Social Security. But we have to make sure we're doing it the right way. And Illinois has some of the strongest language in our Illinois state constitution regarding specifically pensions. Article 13, Section 12, I believe, says you cannot change or diminish any pension benefit. So that has led us to what they did in 2011, which was introduced Tier 2. They're not changing the benefit. They're only changing it for new hires.
Okay.
So those new hires, they have to work a little longer and pay differently into the pension system. The only other state that has language as strong as we do is New York, and they've actually addressed it quite well. They have introduced, I think to date, 12 or 13 new tiers.
Okay.
So, I think that's the way we're going to have to go unless the Constitution changes.
Right. And does that delay the pain? And potentially, I think it was in the 30s that Arkansas was the last state to file for bankruptcy. So, I mean, if there's some wrong turns made, I know that there are rules now where it's tougher for municipalities and states to file for bankruptcy, but it's still possible. I mean, if there's some wrong turns made, if that were to happen, if that were to take place, worst case scenario, do those pensions go away or at least get slashed, quite a bit?
Yeah, and that's the big concern, and sadly, I don't think politicians pay too much attention to it. They just want to keep taxing and spending,
right.
Which it's a lot harder for a state to claim bankruptcy because the Supreme Court has stated that it's not that they can't, but they have the ability to tax. So you can't print money, but you can print money by taxing, and we're seeing the ill effects of that right now, where we keep taxing and people are leaving. People are voting with their feet. So
the tax base gets smaller the more they tax because people are leaving.
Yeah.
They're renting U-Haul trucks and getting the hell out of Dodge.
Yep. And
so with the tax base getting smaller, they keep raising. It's really almost when I look at it, if I'm glad I don't have your job right now.
Yeah.
That's a very tough solve unless everybody's gonna have some skin removed in this process. That's the only way I see it getting better.
It's gonna be tough, and I tell you why I do love this job though, is because especially in the state of Illinois, my view on it is if we can come up with compromise and change that can get us out of the hole we're in, what better message to send other people and the federal government saying if Illinois can do it, anyone could do it.
Well, and not to
because truly, if Illinois can't do it, anyone can. Yeah.
And I believe this with all my heart. We can if we're willing. If we have the intestinal fortitude to make the tough decisions.
I believe that you are willing to make the tough decisions. I don't believe so much in the folks sitting next to you up there in Springfield or down there in Springfield.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I'm one of many, and as my high school football coach used to say, if you do your 1/11th every play, you'll score a touchdown every play, right? So it's getting the other 10 guys on board. And I think we can do that slow but sure.
Yeah, good.
And, it is going to have to be a slow and steady race. So, I mean, not to put you in a corner or anything, but, I mean, that's a huge debt to obviously, overcome. What are just some of your just general ideas that to get out of that kind of huge financial hole? Your tax base is leaving in such huge numbers. I mean, that's really where we're going to get a lot of this revenue from. What kind of ideas? I mean, obviously you guys are looking at, marijuana legalization or however that works, and that's going to be a portion of your revenue.
Sportsbook gambling.
Yeah. What are some of your other ideas to get out of the hole?
Well, revenue is a great idea. Revenue's always good, but the revenue that we need to create needs to come from employment and more jobs, more businesses, more jobs, because those are the sustainable. The marijuana thing is, and coming from me, I'm one of the only Republicans on the negotiating team. I think I think this is coming just about everywhere. So I'm for it overall, but I hate the argument from people that I hear that we need to do this because it's going to solve our fiscal woes.
Right.
It's a ridiculous argument. We're talking about we have a $38 billion a year budget. Recreational marijuana is looking at bringing in $300 to $500 million a year before the cost of oversight.
It's a Band-Aid on a juggler.
Yeah, I mean, you take away the zeros, and it's like having a job that you make $38,000 a month, and you want to get another job to make more money, and you find a job and you're making $50.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's the truth. So, and also the ESG program where they're talking about investing the pensions, the block of funds more aggressively. Mm-hmm. And I mean, obviously, the volatility of the stock market, things like that. That could be great. You could hit a gold mine with the pensions, or you could really be in trouble quick, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And generally speaking, over the last several years, our the amount of money that we're getting from our investments in the pension system has been pretty good. But the pension problem that we have all boils down to the state skipped payments. They took pension holidays. And then from there, it's hard climbing your way out. It's much like making the minimum payments on your credit card bill, right? You're never going to get out of it.
Right, just paying all the interest.
But I think if we can, we have the, our pension system was modeled under the Edgar pension ramp to fix it. And then we took a pension holiday, and then we slid back down. So if I think we can if we re-amortize the debt we have and reload the ramp, as long as we don't miss any payments, slow but sure over a period of time, I think we can fix it.
Not just pay the interest on it.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, as far as Trump's, I'm going to go to federal more. As far as Trump's programs and his reworking the trade agreements, things like that with Mexico, with Canada, with Asia, has that helped Illinois at all in terms of bringing back manufacturing as a state as a whole at all?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily Trump's policies that have, specifically for Illinois, but I mean, you look nationwide. Obviously, it's done some good, and some of the tariffs and stuff. There's been a little pain, especially with
soybeans and
stuff like that. But you got somebody in there that's not going to take any crap anymore, and he's going to fix this. And I Democrat or Republican, I always give everybody the benefit of the doubt. We'll see if it works.
Yeah.
Hopefully it does, right?
Right.
But I don't buy into the whole, everybody does something and they ridicule them for it. Well, let's see if it works out.
Yeah, good. Now, as far as your pro-gun stances, which I'm a pro-Second Amendment guy, obviously, the state of Illinois, I mean, there's a lot of people, obviously, in the state of Illinois, hunters, farmers, people who enjoy owning guns, understand the right to own guns, the reason for owning guns. But there's a lot of people in Illinois, especially lawmakers, that don't. I mean, how much of an uphill battle is that for you, keeping the wolves at bay with some of their attempts at taking those rights?
It's been a big uphill struggle. That's one of the things that I'm really passionate about is citizenry being armed, the Second Amendment, and in Illinois, there's probably no worse place to be. And it's been an uphill battle, especially with some of the Chicago Democrats. And I found that the most frustrating thing about gun legislation in particular is you have this mob of legislators in Chicago that when you talk to them off the floor, just, talking as friends, they've never held a gun. They've never bought a gun. They don't know anything about it. Which is why this summer I'm going to try to bring some of those people over here to our Springfield, Rock River, let them see how the process works, take them out shooting. And one thing, whether you're Democrat, Republican, or whatever, one language we all speak is economy and jobs. So if they can see that, especially over here, that this is good employment and these people are making a living, hopefully that changes their mindset. But in Illinois, we have the FOID card. We have all these, all this red tape when it comes to ownership. And I just the other day I filed, I think it's Senate Bill 58 or 85. I'm dyslexic, I can't remember. But it's my bill that I filed again to repeal the FOID card in the state of Illinois.
That's awesome. And so my wife is from Montreal, Canada. She's a Quebecois. Never held a gun in her life. Ends up marrying a goon like me, and I'm a hillbilly basically.
Yeah.
And I've always believed in guns. I mean, guns we used to lay around our house when I was a kid. There were 4 boys, and I had one sister, and there was a gun rack downstairs, and guns were everywhere. Nobody got shot in the house. Nobody horsed around with guns. We had common sense. She was terrified of guns. Didn't believe in them. Her mother didn't believe in them. They were just absolutely against them. Her father, he just passed away at 88 years old this past year. Never touched a gun, didn't believe in them. And I had her go out and learn to shoot with my business partner in my law enforcement. He's an amazing instructor when it comes to guns. And he taught her how to shoot. He started her with 22 caliber pistols all the way up to a 44 Magnum. And there was about 15 guns that she shot that one day. It was a 5-hour course that she went through. And after she got done learning about safety, learning how to shoot, learning which end is dangerous, which end isn't, the common sense stuff that goes with it, she absolutely fell in love with the sport of shooting, target shooting, and understands why people own guns, right? And then so you bringing a bunch of lawmakers down here to Springfield and Rock River, wherever you bring them, I think they're going to come away and say, okay, we get it.
Yeah. Yeah, and, I'm getting ready to introduce a bill to here probably in the next couple of weeks. It's modeled off of what Iowa just did, and it will allow school districts to teach gun safety or hunter safety course if they so choose. And I think if you look back, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm willing to make a pretty substantial wager that any of these mass shootings that have happened in the past, any of these shootings in Chicago that we see on a daily basis, I'm willing to bet that not one of them ever took a hunter safety course, has never had proper gun safety training. If you teach our young kids what a gun does and how to respect it, I don't think you'll see some of the stuff we see. A
lot. And of course, there are a lot more things that go into it. There's a big difference, obviously, between a kid that's growing up in the rough areas of Chicago with the crime and that culture that's going on up there, unfortunately, and other kids that are in different parts of the state. And the thing that we've done research on, and when I read, when you go back through mass shootings, about 95% of the people that are responsible for mass shootings in the past 25 years were basically raised on drugs like Ritalin and Prozac and things like that. Now, I'm not saying that those drugs are directly responsible, but the mental illness and a lot of the stuff that has exploded over the past few decades, certainly it has to be attributed to something. And I can tell you that a lot of people say that it is processed foods that are causing problems. There's a lot of things that go into this that are causing the human mind and the body not to work correctly anymore, and things going haywire, and people are picking up guns and killing innocent children.
Sure. And they're doing those studies now. I mean, what is it, correlation or causation, like which is actually causing it. But I mean, like you said, Champ, whatever they call the serotonin reuptake inhibitors, almost every one of these, there's some element of some kind of pharmaceutical or Ritalin or whatever in that plays into this. So again, whether it's processed foods, diet, nutrition, or these things that are literally changing the chemical of people's brains. And when you look on the inserts of these, it causes suicidal ideation or homicidal ideation. So it's like that's a huge deal, man. I mean, obviously,
and it never gets brought up when we see mainstream news and the discussion of gun violence. It's always focused on guns.
Right.
It's a tool, just like a hammer or anything else, a saw that's laying around in the garage. It's a tool.
Yeah.
And so in the end, something is causing this in society, a combination of things, however we want to break it down, but it's not the guns.
No, that's true. And my former seatmate, who now just retired, Senator Tim Bivens, he represented the district just north of me. He told me an interesting statistic one time that the first mass shooting happened in a school happened, I think he said 1 year to the date after the Supreme Court ruled taking God out of public schools.
Well, I mean, that's, I remember growing up and say I pledge allegiance to the flag, and that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that stuff that's not going on anymore.
Yeah.
And, Paul Harvey, what was it, 1964, 63?
Late 60s.
Said, if I were the devil, remember that speech?
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy.
So when you listen to that, he was
Spot on.
Nostradamus, dude. He was Nostradamus moving forward.
Yeah.
He knew what was coming.
Yeah.
He could see it plain as day, and it's scary that you bring that up.
Well, something I want to ask you about as a former paramedic. Two questions, actually, because I lived in St. Louis, and there was a lot of paramedics that were getting ambushed and shot and killed. And I think in a lot of states now they're bringing out legislation to arm EM teams and paramedics. What do you think about that?
I actually introduced that bill 2 years ago.
Nice.
To allow firemen to be able to carry concealed on the job. I obviously didn't go anywhere because the the anti-gunners have control of the legislature right now. But
yeah.
I find it ridiculous that I, as a concealed carry holder, I can carry concealed when I'm not on duty, but when I'm on duty in more dangerous situations,
right,
that I can't.
I mean, that makes sense with Illinois law. No offense to you, obviously, but like the gun restrictions, like in Chicago, they think more restricting of guns is somehow going to help, because I mean they got some of the most strictest gun laws in Illinois, and look at the just rampant shootings and deaths that are in Chicago. I mean, I used to live there, and not to get into the home and square thing, but I mean that some of those areas are just absolutely it's
war
Thunderdome.
zones.
It's
war
straight up
zones.
Thunderdome.
It is fun though debating some of this stuff when we get a chance to on the floor, some of this gun legislation. Perfect example, that bill that I just talked about with the firefighters being able to carry concealed on the job. It got sent to a subcommittee, and I had a hearing on it. And one of the opponents was the Police Chiefs Association.
Wow.
And we were in this subcommittee hearing, and I said, Chief, what do you have against this bill? He said, firemen shouldn't carry guns. That's what cops are for. And I said, Chief, do your officers carry a fire extinguisher in their squad cars? And he said, yeah. And I just stared at him, and it took about 5 seconds, and he's like, it's not the same. And I'm like, oh, okay, well.
That's an awesome response, man.
Well, and here's the thing. They equate having, and I'm not saying this to disparage any police officers, because I love police. I've trained police officers for 25 years almost now. But a lot of people equate a police officer's uniform with a higher level of existence and training, and that's not the case. Yes, they have to qualify with their guns. Yes, they have to do some defensive tactics training on how to go hands-on with people. Neal, do you know the average across the country time in 1 year span, how much most police departments make their police officers do defensive tactics training? How many hours would you say in 1 year do they do?
Oh, man. I'm going to guess, and I would say 40.
You told me this when I first had you on my original podcast. Yeah,
8
insane.
hours.
Insane.
8 hours. And there's many that don't have that much at all. Okay, so now they're taking people that don't know how to handle another human being, don't know how to put their hands on another person, unless they've gone somewhere and gotten training at a martial arts facility, whatever, done jiu-jitsu or wrestled, grown up an athlete like you have. So now they've given them tools on their belts. That's the only thing they have to rely on when the proverbial dung hits the fan, right? So that's the scary part. But the uniform does not turn someone into superhuman. It actually makes them a target, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of civilians out there, including people who are, whether you're off-duty or an on-duty fireman, which you're not a civilian at that point, who are more than qualified to carry a weapon, right? If a civilian can carry a weapon around because of their concealed carry permit, I can't fathom why paramedics and police officers or firemen would not be allowed to. It defies the rules of common sense that there are actually people against it.
Well, that's the thing about common sense. It's not very common anymore.
Well, I think that those people would have common sense if there weren't folks who were pulling the strings.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, right. And concealed carry holders overall, they are responsible people. You don't hear of a concealed carry holder in a restaurant getting into an argument and shooting somebody just because they got in an argument. Right?
Yeah.
So, and which, to your point about, officers being a target, I'm not against open carry, but it's why even if we did have open carry, I would carry concealed.
Yeah. I don't want anybody to know that I'm carrying.
Yeah. That's St. Louis. Having lived there the last 10 years, they recently it's open carry, concealed carry. I mean, and all the lawmakers thought it was just going to be this big nightmare scenario, and it totally has not. I mean, obviously on the north side, it's just like Chicago, but you're not just seeing, like you said, no one's running. Before those laws happened, you had these kind of goobers who stepped off their Xbox and then walked in a Starbucks with an AR over their shoulder just to kind of, make a weird kind of whatever they were doing. But
yeah,
per that legislation, when they just kind of open it up and concealed open, it's been fine. I mean, like I said, you still have your crime and stuff, but legal gun owners aren't doing that. Yeah. Aren't a part of the problem.
Yeah.
So what else you got going on?
No, the question. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The opioid crisis, man. It's like they're starting to have legislation now to start to hold these doctors accountable for over-prescribing these oxys and stuff. Because, I mean, as you know, the epidemic is what
is it, 70,000 a year dying now?
The Vietnam War every single year. I mean, those numbers are just absolutely staggering. And What's your thoughts on the opioid crisis? And then we'll get into like how some of this heroin's getting into how some of this heroin's getting into the country.
Yeah, I did an opioid roundtable last year to kind of bring in the community and discuss the issue in my district specifically. Luckily, in here in my district, it hasn't been quite as bad as other places, but it's getting worse. And we've done some legislation that can kind of help with it. One being, if you're prescribed an opioid, now you can forgo that and get a medical marijuana card instead. I think that's a good option. Another thing that we did was we made it more readily available for the teledoc services for psych patients and people addicted to opioids to be able to Skype in and talk to a doctor rather than have to wait in line and see a doc. But this is a societal issue. This is not going to be fixed with legislation.
Agree.
This has to be communities coming together, holding people accountable, holding their loved ones accountable, and fixing it that way. Legislation is going to fix this.
Well, I mean, as far as getting it, as far as these things being so readily available and so almost overprescribed by doctors, I mean, thoughts on holding doctors responsible for any of these?
Oh, absolutely. And just like I think that's definitely something we should do is hold doctors accountable that are overprescribing these opioids. Just like in the state of Illinois, going back to the gun thing, one of the biggest reasons that we have such high gun crime rate in the city of Chicago is these activist judges are letting these people out with probation. Prosecute these people to the fullest, and you'll start to see a downtick.
Wow.
There was a lady that bought 3 guns legally in the city of Chicago. This was about 5 or 6 years ago. She sold them, and then those guns were used in a crime. The lady was given 3 months probation.
Wow. That's not a deterrent.
No. So, I mean, that's part of the biggest problem.
So basically, it was a felon felons giving her money to go buy the guns because she could, handing them over, and they were going and using them in the commission of a crime. And
something I've heard, and this is I used to live in Chicago and used to teach in Cabrini Green. There's been rumors for years about just basically more of the South Side, but like caches of weapons just being found in alleys, and then people taking them and just. I don't know if you've heard of that. I don't know if it's just a rumor, if it's a conspiracy theory, but I mean, as a part of maybe. Yeah. Have you heard anything like that? Just like guns showing up?
Not specifically, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's, deliberate, like, hey, let's let them kill themselves off, but that's kind of, I don't even know if it's necessarily true, but when I heard that, it was crazy. And then I used to work near this place called Home and Square. And
tell him what the little kids he used to teach used to tell you. He was a teacher up there in the roughest area of Chicago.
What'd you teach?
It was kind of history, just contemporary world issues type stuff. It was not too long after 9/11, so it was. But this place called Home and Square, which is what they call kind of a black site, a police black site. So supposedly people would go in and not come out, and people would come out with I'm sorry, it's not funny. Some of their organs harvested.
Oh yeah.
Never.
What the little kids tell you?
That's what would happen. Some people would go in there and either not come out or come out, or
I thought you were going to do the impression of a 5-year-old telling you or 7-year-old telling you.
Oh yeah, I got to hear this now.
Do it.
No, they weren't that young. I taught a little bit older kids that I was Mr. Jeff. So Mr. Jeff, have you heard about Home and Square? No, please tell me. And this is also a group of kids who thought Candyman was real, the horror movie about the guy who was killing people in Cabrini Green. So I just found it interesting because I did wind up hearing it after I left Chicago, hearing about Home and Square. I won't even say his name. There was a reporter who, I was once kind of cool with, and he went in there and got kind of, not roughed up, but kicked off, and he was basically doing an investigative report on Home and Square. And
they didn't like him being anywhere near it. He couldn't even stand on the sidewalk on the opposite side of the street where the hotel was. They didn't even want him around. The way their reaction was tells you something's going on there. It was very odd. It was very odd because I saw that whole thing go down also. So it was very interesting. But, the opioid crisis. The heroin, how it's getting in the country, that's stuff that we've researched quite a bit in terms of, it's not just over the border. It's not just the drug dealers that are bringing it in type thing. We've seen some stuff being funded with, some operations. I mean, Iran-Contra obviously was funded with drug money. So there's a lot of stuff federally that's
this
going
kind
on.
of, I mean, we've talked about this a lot of times with, like I said, our former Russian Spetsnaz guy and just other people who, whether we want to recognize it or not, there is almost a black budget, if you will, an underground budget that kind of, like you said, Congress wouldn't give permission for Reagan and those guys to do what they did down in Central America, so they started using drug money to go do it. But it's drug, it's people, it's guns. It's human organs. I mean, this has been confirmed by a lot of people. So it's kind of interesting to start hearing about this kind of underground, not just shadow government, shadow economy, like into the trillions that does a lot of this stuff that, it's kind of off books. But
speaking of opioids, I mean that the new stuff. Well, I don't know if it's necessarily new, but it's kind of making the news lately. Is the car fentanyl?
Yeah. The fentanyl's terrible.
Man, I read an article. There was a fireman that responded to a call and just walked into the room and like brushed up against something and killed him. Yeah,
I just saw a police officer on video ODing just because he opened the bag and it just like a speck of it got into his nostrils and dropped him, and they had to give him Narcan to bring him back and save his life. And I sat on the board here in Davenport for the opioid crisis stuff that's going on. And the nightmare stuff I'm hearing, they're hitting people with Narcan 2 to 3 times in one day because they OD 3 times in one day.
Yeah.
These people are. I mean, this is a really, really severe situation. So
and that's what the addicts look for, right? You kill somebody with your product, that's the good stuff.
Right.
That's crazy, man.
No, that's honestly, unfortunately, really, really true. Like, what? I can die? Let me get a hit of that. Like, wow.
And they have scooped up 300-400 pounds of fentanyl coming across the border, which is enough to kill the United States.
Yeah.
Right, 300 to 400 pounds of narcotics. I mean, what they say, they made a bust up near Boston that was 25 pounds, and that's enough to kill everyone in Boston.
Yeah.
So
that's insane.
The fact that that's even created, the fact that there should be a death penalty for anybody who manufactures it.
Yeah.
In my mind. That stuff shouldn't exist on the planet.
Yeah. Well, and that's another piece of legislation we did here a couple years ago. I voted for it, but I took pause to it, being a medic and having to go on some of these calls and giving Narcan. The bill was that anybody can buy Narcan now, so you can go get it over the counter.
Holy cow!
Isn't it pretty expensive? Am I thinking?
Yeah, everybody should have it technically, right?
Yeah, well, that's the thought behind it, but at the same time, like in my brain, seeing this stuff go on and having to give Narcan. Are people going to start buying it now as like a safety net?
Oh, wow.
Right. Yeah. Like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to take more than I usually do. So watch me and give me that.
That is so.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, honestly, and I gotta just keep it real. I mean, part of me, you don't ever want to see people's lives lost like this. But at the end of the day, man, this is kind of social Darwinism, dude. We got to thin the herd a little bit. I mean, if it's not that kind of thing, no, seriously, that kind of.
But there's people, I think, things that I've heard where somebody would smoke a marijuana cigarette that had heroin laced in it and it had fentanyl and they died.
Right.
So they in no way, shape, or form expected that.
What you're talking about, like, I'm just gonna get messed up, dude, and I got my Narcan here, so I'm fine. Like that kind of logic. If
you're already playing with the Grim Reaper,
exactly. So if that's not gonna take you out, something else will. Like, I'm gonna blow dry my hair in the tub. Let's see what happens. You know what I mean? It's gonna be toaster. Yeah, exactly. Something's gonna take you out if that's how you're thinking. So, man, that's just. That's just so sad because a lot of it is children, and I'm actually it's not even kids, man. I have friends from high school. Her mom OD'd. I'm like, what? It's crazy. So moving on a little bit, we don't want to keep.
You want to work on farm bills, agriculture, some of that stuff.
As someone who had served on an agriculture committee, we've all seen and we've all heard what is Illinois is the second corn producer in the U.S. 14.89%. I forget where that stat's from, maybe a few years ago, but we're a huge corn producer.
Yeah,
and that kind of monoculture farming is doing a lot of damage with the kind of stuff, Monsanto, those seeds that GMO seed is poisoning, animals and people and that, but for Monsanto to then shut down farms because they're
allegedly
I've seen enough.
Allegedly poisoning.
Well, okay. No, there's been a French. I mean, they have found studies to show, even with rats or whatever, what from tumors to kidney failure to organ failure, what some of this GMO stuff does. But even outside of that, the health effects, Monsanto shutting down family farms who have had their farms cross-pollinated with Monsanto seed. And then the Monsanto comes in like, oh, you guys, you're basically violating the patent. And like, well, we don't have Monsanto stuff. And then they test their stuff, and because it's been cross-pollinated, farms are being shut down. Yeah. You're looking at, I forget the stat, it was like almost $200 million in settlements that Monsanto had to pay or that were paid out.
But yeah, there's a new reversal, a new law, I believe, that was passed where farmers can now sue Monsanto for cross-pollen, right?
Yeah, I just seen that the other day, actually.
Which is a great thing for the individual, for the family farmer.
Sure, yeah.
Because now they've got a defense. Yeah. Now they can fight back, which is awesome. And it looks like Monsanto, with the judgment for a massive amount of money from the gentleman that got cancer from glyphosate or
glyphosate.
Glyphosate. It's almost like the coin is flipped a little bit on Monsanto.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
Monsanto had, as of November 28, 2012, Monsanto had filed 142 lawsuits against farmers for violations of its tech agreement and its patents and GMO seeds, and then involving 410 farms and 56 farms that are small businesses in 27 states. So it's a little bit of everywhere. And like I said, the estimated settlements were 4 times, they said, the record judgments. Normally was 21.6 million. Now it's up to 160.6 million from settlements of Monsanto. So there's a lot of not legislation but litigation going on with Monsanto, and that's cool if farmers are able to protect themselves better now. Because the one I saw was like Farm Inc. or something like that, some documentary. I mean, the guy was like 50 years old. It was a farm that's been in his family for almost like 100 years, and he's like, they came to my farm, they tested my stuff, saw it was cross pollinated, and on the spot drained his silos, like 6 or 7 silos, just pulled the thing and just. He's like, I just lost, however many, it's just his livelihood essentially.
Yeah.
And then afterwards they found out he was clean, but it's like, wow, how much did you have to go through to get exonerated? I mean, it's just crazy how Monsanto's just monopolized. So I guess my larger question is, what are your thoughts? I mean, on how how predatory Monsanto is with making sure almost every corn seed in the U.S. is theirs, even knowing the deleterious health effects.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, I'm for any legislation that we can repeal or move forward that gives more individual liberty is the best way to go, and especially for our farmers. And in Illinois, you're right. I mean, we're the farmers are the largest employer in the nation. Agriculture is, whether it's actually farming or John Deere or whatever it might be. But yeah, I mean, we have to make sure that people are not being bullied by the big corporations.
Well, and then we find out, Monsanto executives, whether it's Republican or Democrat, wind up going up to head the FDA, the USDA, some of these acronym, what's some of the other ones, the EPA.
The jobs are interchangeable.
Commerce, Justice Department, yeah, and it doesn't even matter what political ideology these corporations wind up putting people in these seats that wind up protecting them and then giving kind of the farmers and us the shaft a little bit. But if the laws are changing, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm
with it. Like you said, that's seeing some of the little, and that was the weird thing. Some of the tests they were doing on rats, it was only 90-day tests. So it's like literally from what I've heard and what I've read, the effects and the tumors and all these things start happening after the 90 days. So the executives of Monsanto are like, no, we did a 90-day study and everything was all good. They can say that and they're absolutely true, but the things start manifesting after the 90-day period. Yeah. Some of these studies.
Yeah,
so
day 91, the rat died.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Dude, being in politics, I tell you what, that is one thing that I have found to be absolutely hilarious is the skewing of statistics is it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's like, well, 99.9% of shark attacks happen in shallow water. Well, of course you do, because that's where the people are. You can make anything sound good.
That's awesome. I think this guy missed his calling. You need to go do some funny bone business over here, man.
So what is the right now in the state of Illinois Republican to Democrat ratio?
It's a very lot to a very little. I don't know the numbers. Well, actually, yeah, I do. There's 59 Senate seats. Republicans hold 18.
Okay, so yeah, you're definitely outnumbered.
And in the House, there's 119 seats, and I think Republicans have 62.
Okay.
Yeah. So Democrats have super majorities in both chambers.
Okay.
And the governor's office as of today.
And I have this, fact or fiction. Did anyone enter any legislation that would have been a vote on annexing Chicago out of the state of Illinois and making it its own state? Has that ever been brought in as a possible legislation?
No, it has not. And actually, believe it or not, I've actually looked into that, and it's pretty easy to do.
Is it?
Yeah, it really is. So
watch out, Chicago.
So between Chicago and Springfield, just make them kind of like satellite, their own just individual District of Columbia type places.
No, but seriously, as far as the process, I mean, it wouldn't be easy to do, but the process is pretty simple. It takes, I think it's like 40% of the population would have to sign a petition. And then once you got that, then it's a simple act of Congress.
I think,
that is crazy easy.
So it would take the 40% and then you guys to get control of the Congress.
Oh,
right?
Well, you annex Chicago, and Illinois is about as Republican as Kansas.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There you go. So I think that's something for you to work on in the future.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, start signing petitions, man.
See how I plant seeds like that?
I see that. I think he's hooked. I think he's hooked on that one.
All right. Do you have any more questions for the
no,
Senator?
man. This is. We could probably sit here and chop it up forever because Illinois is just they're struggling right now.
The bridge. We have one. Oh, we have to talk about the bridge. Is the bridge actually going to make it to Illinois? I know you get asked that all the time.
What, the 74 bridge?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you guys drive by it probably all the time.
Is that federally funded?
So most of it, I think it's 85% federally funded.
Okay.
And then the other 15% is split between the two states.
Okay, because the jokes of Bridge to Nowhere,
right,
constantly going.
Oh.
Why are you laughing at me? You've never heard that?
No, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, here a few years ago, I had to really push hard to get the $75 million from Illinois state government to kind of get the project going on the Illinois side.
Wow.
And I was able to secure that, and I got people calling me saying, "Oh, we're just building a new bridge so people have a nicer road to move over to Iowa and this and that." And
nicer road to move to Iowa.
Speeding up the exodus.
Right.
It's called the Express Lane.
Right. Express Lane, yeah. There's going to be 4 of them.
So, and then we have one other question, at least I do, on the speed rail or light rail or whatever they want to call it from the Illinois Quad Cities over to Chicago. Is that something that do you think is ever going to happen?
Yeah, it is going to happen. And the holdup right now is you're having to deal with federal government, state government, municipal government, and 2 rail lines.
Okay.
So trying to get everybody on board is a task, and it seems like we got all the ducks in the row except for one rail line. But yeah, it's coming. It's just a matter of when. The funding has been appropriated. It's there.
And ultimately, does that benefit anyone but the Chicago economy?
No, I think it really does benefit our area in the sense that we have Augustana is a perfect example.
Okay. A lot of kids from Chicago go to school there.
Yeah. And then the idea that in the grand scheme of things, eventually, the idea is once it gets to the Quad Cities, then it will go to Iowa City and then Omaha.
Okay.
I'm originally from Nebraska.
Right.
Play ball there. There's a lot of farm boys that love their John Deere stuff, man.
Yeah.
They'll be hopping on that train coming to see the John Deere Commons every week.
Well, the way I see it, with the Augustana kids being from Chicago and stuff, I mean, it's not cheap to go to Chicago, so technically probably most of those kids have brand new Mercedes-Benzes anyway. I was raised a little different than those kids.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So, well, Neal, thank you very much for coming in studio. We really appreciate it.
And
thanks, guys.
For sure, man. And what we were talking about off air a little bit, Illinois is kind of notorious for, a little bit of shadiness, if you know what I mean. You seem like a very genuine guy, and please do all you can, man, to keep doing what you're doing and representing the people, and stay out of the swamp, my friend.
No, I appreciate it, man, and it was a pleasure being on, and I'm back on duty at Moline tomorrow, so you guys call 911 over there. You probably see my ugly mug.
All right, buddy. Be careful on the job.
All right, thanks, guys.
Senator Neal
Thank you.
Anderson, ladies and gentlemen. Peace. Stay tuned. There'll always be more.